Hello again, friends. And you are our friends, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru, right here, wherever it is that you have pulled up to on this Monday afternoon. We thank you for being here. Hope your breakfast went well today. I am the great Brian Last. I'll be reading your questions, some of them sent many, many, many times, over and over and over again, to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com, some on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru, but the man who will be answering these questions from Louisville, Kentucky, high atop Castle Cornette, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Woo, mercy! Handsome Jimmy loves you all, baby. Roanoke, my old hometown. Woo, mercy! Oh, I'm sorry. I've had a flashback there. Hello again, everybody. No, it's 2020. We're doing new shows. We've been re-energized. I woke up this morning, kissed Harley and rubbed Stacy on the belly. It may have been the other way around. Went out to the garage, let Bertie Sanders out. He was singing nice tunes and everything. It's freezing fucking cold outside, but I'm not going to go outside. And it's a fine day, a fine, fine day here on the Drive-Thru. We're going to be positive as the Iron Sheik's first drug test here in the new year on the Drive-Thru.
As positive as the Iron Sheik's first drug test, his second drug test, his middle drug test, and his final drug test.
I don't know that he's taken his final one. You never know about these things. So what is the premise of this program?
The premise, as we've said many, many, many times here on the show, is that questions are sent in, and you, the expert analyst, will be answering these questions.
I do have an email.
Oh.
I've got an email I want to start out with because I think this was on the Drive-Thru not long ago. So I'm trying to keep, instead of the experience, I'm trying to keep these, these shows straight. But we talked about, for whatever reason, I know it was a musical submission on the Drive-Thru because here it is in the email. Nick writes, "Dear Jim, up until a few weeks ago, your dislike of rap was an accepted fact. But then, out of the blue, you and Brian were vetting a musical submission that was put to the tune Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang. Afterwards, you spontaneously dropped 16 bars. I'm not sure I know nothing about Birth and No Bars, but dropped 16 bars from the original version of this song. I'm going to need an explanation on how you can profess to not like rap and then be able to recite 16 bars from a 40-year-old rap song. Sincerely, Nick." Doesn't everybody know Rapper's Delight by heart?
Not everyone, but I think a lot of people of a certain age group, because it was the first rap song to go to number one, I believe.
Well, it was the first rap. I don't think it made number one, but it was the first rap song in effect. If you want to go, I mean, there's obviously, we can go through a long and convoluted discography, but mainstream, that would be the first rap song. And not only did they see, here's the thing. I hate what rap became. It's sort of like wrestling. I hate what rap became, but it started out as so much fun. This fucking song comes on the radio in 79, right? Yeah. And it's got the fucking Chic Good Times. It's got that. And these guys are having fun. It was before rap turned into screaming and yelling and mad and cussing and shooting and cutting everyone and fucking those bitches and all that stuff, right? It was a good music and these guys are having fun. And I used to be able to, because we got, me and Bolin, of course. Actually, I bought it and then he taped it from me, but we got the 12-inch single. It was like 13 minutes long. And at one point, I could do the whole thing in goddamn order because we taped it off and you'd play it in the car on road trips, going to fucking matches, whatever. And now I can do pieces of it. I can't do it, in order start to finish anymore like I can the long version of American Pie, which someday I'll win some money on. But, that's the reason why hip hop was named hip hop, because the fucking bridge or whatever they call it, to the hip, the hop, the hip, the hip, 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 hoppy, don't stop rocking to the bang, bang, boogie, up, jump to boogie to the rhythm of the boogie to beat or whatever the fuck, right?
Well, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and nobody knew what the title of the song was, so they would go in the record store and say, "Can you give me that hip hop song?" And that's where it came from.
You see, A couple things. One is, I just looked it up. I was actually wrong. It was I think it was the first rap song to get into the top 40. Believe it or not, do you know what the first rap song to go to number one was? I know this off the top of my head. Do you know what it
Rapture.
was? Rapture by Blondie, which you listen back to it now. It's like, I can't believe people thought this was rap, but Blondie did all. Blondie also had a reggae song go to number one. They had a rock song go to number one.
The Tide is High.
The disco song go to number one. So really remarkable band. But the thing about Rapper's Delight, there's a really great book that came out a few years back called The Big Payback, which is the history of hip hop, from the very beginning to, whatever, a few years back. But it's a remarkably written book. It's really, really good. Amazing stories. A lot of early Rick Rubin stuff if you ever want to know about the man behind Smoky Mountain Wrestling. But almost all the lyrics in that song, well, I shouldn't say almost all, a good portion of those lyrics, like hip hop, that was taken from local DJs in New York.
Yes.
Who were doing that in between tracks, and that's kind of what influenced that song, which influenced everything else in rap.
Okay, Mr. New York music scene, what was the young teenage DJ's name that had the first Bronx basement party in 1973 where he did do rhyming in between the songs over the Zabada?
You're not talking about, well, let's see. There's Africa Bambaataa, there's Kool Herc.
Yo, there you go. Kool Herc. He was the first one.
Okay.
That is a trivia note that I got from somewhere.
How do you know that?
Because I retain a lot of useless knowledge, and I've studied and read all these books on entertainment in all genres since I was fucking 9 years old, and have that massive library downstairs, which is why that I understand things as related to the entertainment business and the performance and business aspect, because I studied it even before I got into wrestling. But let me ask you this question, Brian.
Yes.
Did you ever go over to a friend's house to eat and the food just ain't no good? The macaroni's soggy, the peas are mushy, and the chicken tastes like wood, and you try to play it off like you think you can by saying that you already ate, but your friend says, Ma, he's just being polite, and she piles some more on your plate?
No, that typically doesn't happen to me.
Well, if it ever does, just remember you've got... I'm a CASANOVA and the rest is FLY. I go by the code of the Doctor of Love, and these reasons I'll tell you why. I'm 6'1" and I'm tons of fun and I dress to a T. I got more moves than Muhammad Ali, and I rap so viciously.
Okay, let me ask you this, couple things. First of all, let me just say the lyric that resonates the most with me, that reminds me of growing up in New York, is, I got a color TV so I can see the Knicks play basketball. That line, for whatever reason, that line, whatever, it makes me feel nice, but... Right
in the taint, right where your New York is located, right in the perineum.
I don't know about that, but who decided, when you had to replace the Junkyard Dog and you bring in George Wells, who decided to give him the name Master G from a song that had come out 5 years earlier and have him come out to Rapper's Delight? That was his entrance music. Whose decision was that? It seems like Bill Watts wouldn't be on that. Was it Joel Watts? Who would have?
Well, knowing the principles involved, but not knowing the exact story, it can be something as similar as, all right, we've got to replace the dog with another black baby face. And we need to give him the dog flavor, but change it up. Joel, what's that stuff they're playing? Rap? And Joel, and of course, George Wells is a black man, but he's also in his mid-40s. He was probably still listening to fucking, Al Green or whatever. So they got a rap song that they thought people would know, that they could also play on television, because by that point, some of the shit you couldn't play on TV. It was just a bunch of fucking, rap was new. Nobody got it yet. At that time, not all the guys were even coming out to music of any kind. It was just. And also, to be honest, Louisiana, when we moved there in Christmas of '83, the hottest band on Louisiana radio was the Eagles. Because I remember Dennis Condrey saying at least once a fucking trip. Because we didn't have satellite radio back then. I had a cassette, right? But the radio, Dennis Condrey would say once every trip, the Eagles are the hottest band in this fucking state. They are 5 years behind the times here.
Yeah, they broke up in like 1980, didn't they?
Yes, exactly. That's the point of the thing. It was And there was no such thing as classic rock stations then because it was still classic. It was just that was what all the Louisiana stations were playing. This was not a goddamn culturally fucking on the edge era or area. So, yeah, Rapper's Delight for a fucking middle-aged ex-football player in his 40s picked out by the, overly white son of a 50-year-old white promoter. And Bill Dundee was the booker. So I'm sure he could have Timey Kangaroo Down Sport, he didn't know what the fuck rap was.
Were we supposed to think that Master G in the ring was the Master G?
No, they never said that. And I don't, I got to be honest with you. That's the thing is, did-a-doom, doom, doom, did-doom, doom, 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 doom. It kind of sounded like, Dog's thing, but but Master G wasn't going to do it anyway. And there you go.
Well, there you go. It was your letter.
Well, don't make me take the fucking blame. I thought you were talking about the whole goddamn Master G thing.
You should get this book. You would actually really enjoy this book. It's about the business of hip hop as well as the history of it. And it is one of the best books on the music business I've ever read in my life. It's fantastic.
But you know what?
The big payback.
Go ahead. The big payback. And I'll tell you something. In the music business is one of the more crooked businesses. And we've established this. There's been Hitmen was another great book on the music business. Yeah. Where they talked about the at the time the mob, organized crime, was heavily involved in the cutout records and the stuff that mysteriously got lost from the manufacturer to the distributors and things and such. There's always crooks. There's always crooks involved in shady dealings and things. And sometimes if you, ladies and gentlemen, fall afoul of some of these major corporations that do these shady things and these shady dealings, well, then you need look no further than a man who will have your rights and your justice and your payback. He'll be your hitman. He'll have them in mind. He'll have your rights tied right up next to his heart where he can feel them when he puts his hand over his heart and recites the Pledge of Allegiance to the justice system of the United States of America that only he can navigate on your behalf. Brian, who in the world can I be talking about?
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Still to the rest.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, as heard on this past week's Jim Cornette Experience, Stephen P. New will sue their ass because he's suing some outlaw mud show ass up in the great state of Pennsylvania via the federal courts, and he can do it for you, whether locally, nationally, internationally. Well, I guess not internationally. He can't take your case, obviously, if you don't live in the United States of America. At least not yet. I understand that they're thinking about opening up a branch new law office in Australia.
In Davos.
And also one in Davos.
That's right.
But anyway, Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. We talked to him last week on The Experience, but he can handle your case if you've been wronged, trod upon by the giant smelly feet of massive corporations and their negligence, greed, and avarice. If you need somebody to help you when you've got nowhere else to turn for you or your family to keep them safe or to make them whole after some tragic incident, Stephen P. New is the man for you, the consigliere of the cult of Cornette. And just if you have doubt in your mind about whether or not that you have a valid legal case against someone or something, then the number to call is 888-692-8084. And by God, if you don't have a case, he'll tell you. If you do have a case, he'll tell you. And if he can handle your case, he'll tell you that too. But one way or another, you'll get some kind of answer.
I had to mute the conversation off one of his tweets the other day because he posted a pic of the new t-shirt he has that he's giving away for free. And he tagged you and me in it. And my Twitter exploded, like 300 people asking for this shirt. I was like, oh, I can't.
Well, and yes, and we should make mention of the fact that, by the way, Cornette's Collectibles, folks, we'll get to that in a second, but we're doing better than Steven because he got in the hole like 600 shirts, and he's giving these shirts out free, folks. And he's a fine charitable man, but he got so many requests, and I think he was behind 600 at last count, and he's working hard to catch those up. And I think he did say this will be the last ones for the time being because he had to hire extra staff just to fill the t-shirt orders. But that's the kind of guy Steven is. He doesn't want to disappoint the cult of Cornette. And as consigliere, which is, of course, on the top line, the cult of Cornette has been one to do. These things are going to be collector's items in years to come. The ones that he sent out already, I should say.
That's right. Apparently, he sent out so many shirts, people think he should start his own wrestling company. That is the big qualifier nowadays.
But anyway, yeah, so Stephen P. New is the man for you, and tell him that the experience and the drive-through sent you. And if you're a Cult of Cornette member, you get, as we mentioned before, extra special treatment, just extra good.
Well, Jim, let's get some questions here.
But I should mention also, yes, folks, today, Monday, January, January 20th? Am I off? Am I right? Am I wrong?
Monday, January 20th, correct.
Monday, January 20th. If you look at JimCornette.com, you hopefully will see for sale, if you click on collectibles, the action figure that has been so long awaited. It's taken a year. We talked about that on the experience as well. The factory in China was backlogged. Everything's been jammed up. And now, due to the manufacturing time, which is triple what we thought it was, there's going to be about a little less than 500 of these figures available in the calendar year of 2020, autographed at JimCornette.com by me. That's the only place you can get it. And the variant that we wanted for the holiday season of 2019 will hopefully be in by spring. And now there's going to be less than 500 of those available for an entire calendar year also. So we're making another limited edition collector's item, and we didn't even mean to. And we're trying to find a new factory. Those kids just need to goddamn, for heaven's sake, they need to have some work ethic. And I don't think 18 hours a day is too much to ask out of it, because young people have a lot of energy.
Well, they're probably too busy working the rest of their shift over at Apple.
Well, that's true. But anyway, so JimCornette.com, the action figures, get them while they're hot. And that's all I got to say about that.
Okay, well, we got some hot questions this week here for the drive-thru. This first one, Jim, was sent in the CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Matt James in England. Each week, the Pro Wrestling Illustrated weekly newsletter contained a quiz about a specific wrestling personality. The November 15th, 1993 edition quiz centered on Jim Cornette. How about putting Jim to the test on how well he remembers his own career? And I have the questions right here, Jim. Are you up for this challenge?
All right. I'm being ambushed here. I'm being bamboozled and flat-footed, but I will attempt. Now, I don't remember, Bill made up some portions of that magazine. Let's just put it that way. But there were also some times where they would ask you for quotes or quizzes, things like this, so that I will quickly determine whether this is a work or shoot. How's that?
Okay, there's 10 questions. Question 1, who gave Jim Cornette his first break in wrestling by hiring him as a photographer?
Christine Jarrett.
Wrong. The answer, Bill Apter.
Well, okay.
Question 2, who was Cornette's first bodyguard?
Hercules Hernandez.
Wrong. Big Boss Man, then known as Big Bubba. At what event did Baby Doll defeat Cornette to avenge an earlier loss?
Goddamn, constantly for the entire summer of 1986, Great American Bash.
That's actually correct. At the 1986 Great American Bash.
Yeah, it just didn't say which one or how many.
Question 4. How did Paul E. Dangerously anger Cornette in 1987?
In 1987. By putting together the original Midnight Express or becoming their manager or worded in something like that?
Very good. By reuniting the original Midnight Express of Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose. Question 5. What manager once opposed Cornette in a steel cage?
J.J. Dillon.
Correct, J.J. Dillon. Question 6.
And by the way, we drew, oh, God damn it, I used to know, but it was 6,000 people to the, I can't remember the Dollar Gate. It's in the book, but 6,000 people to the Philadelphia Civic Center for the fat manager and the middle-aged excellent worker, but nobody knew that manager in a cage, by the way. Main event on top.
Question 6. Which, was that the main event, actually?
That was the main event.
Wow. Where was Flair that night?
That was, well, God damn it. If I had time to go get the book, I have the book that has all the, we'll take a break later and I'll go and see. I don't remember whether he was there or not. Here's the thing. He probably was there because it was main event because it was cage match. They weren't going to take the goddamn cage down.
Question 6. Which wrestler did Cornette the asshole? That doesn't say that. Which wrestler did Cornette steal from Jimmy Hart in 1983?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Bobby Eaton?
Correct. Bobby Eaton.
Yes. Actually, well, I don't even really know if we ever did a thing where I just, because the family was so big, I was going out with Bobby a lot then, the first family, until he switched babyface. But anyway, I digress.
Question 7, and once again, I remind you, this is from, I believe it was the fall of 1993. Who did Cornette prevent from gaining revenge on Bobby Eaton this past March?
From gaining revenge on the Rock and Roll?
Arn Anderson.
Oh, Arn. Okay. But wait. They went over.
I don't know how you prevented him from.
Yeah, they kind of went over in that match. But anyway, nevertheless, worded unwieldily.
Question 8. When and where did Cornette's Midnight Express win its first NWA Tag Team title?
February 2nd, 1986, the Omni in Atlanta.
Exactly correct. Question 9. Who ended the Midnight Express's second reign as NWA champions?
The Road Warriors.
Correct. And finally, question 10.
October 30th, 1988 in New Orleans, Louisiana.
The most depressing match maybe I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like the match that makes me sympathize with you in the Express more than anything else I've ever seen.
Hey, it was a double switch, baby. I think we ended up being better babyface or bigger babyfaces than the Road Warriors did heels, just because nobody really wanted to boo the Road Warriors. But that was the most heat that they had in front of any live crowd during that run.
Was that the place to do it? I mean, if you were going to do a double switch, or at least attempt it, because again, the Road Warriors were so over as babyfaces, it made it hard. Was New Orleans the place that you would have done it?
Well, I don't know if I would have picked that specific location if I had any place in the country to do it, but it was a good place to do it. It was certainly better than the Northeast, where, they cheered the hunter that shot Bambi's mother even back then, or someplace where the NWA as a whole had no history, like out on the West Coast. New Orleans, they were wrestling fans. We had some history, even though Stan had never worked there. Still, they knew me and Bobby, the Road Warriors, even though they had never worked Mid-South as a territory, obviously had been on national TV for 3 years. And we were able to do it in such a way that at first you could tell at first the people were cheering because we were getting the shit kicked out of us just from the word go. But then as it went on and the way that, we structured the thing, they started going, well, God damn, wait, hey, hold on. What the fuck? And Bobby just with the selling outside and bleeding and trying to get back in and finally blowing me off, but being so out of it. And, still tagging in to sacrifice himself for his partner because Stan had been 2-on-1. By the end of the thing, people got it. They were like, what the fuck? These Road Warriors are assholes. And poor, Midnight Express, which was the goal of the thing.
2 questions coming out of that real quick before we get to the last one from this quiz. 1, how would it have gone over if it had been done in Philadelphia where you won the titles and you were a beloved tag team already? And 2, he actually did work in Mid-South or UWF. The Fabulous Ones had a brief run there in the beginning of 1986. Did Stan ever talk about what it was like for him to work for Bill Watts?
Oh, well, Stan had worked for Bill Watts in 79. When he had broken in December of 78, had a few matches in the Carolinas, he obviously, the Carolinas was loaded with talent. And, Flair put in a word, I believe, with either Mulligan or Murdoch, because Mulligan and Murdoch were running Amarillo at the time. And so Stan went to, and I know this is a long way around this question, but Stan went to Amarillo and didn't last long. Trips were long. There wasn't a lot of money. They wanted to burn him with the fireball. He got heat with Murdoch and Mulligan. He didn't want to get set on fire. And he got booked in Mid-South. And so, yes, he remembered those long-ass trips. It was better, obviously, when he and Steve went back. They were only there a short time as the Fabs, but he had already worked the Mid-South territory. So he was not – he didn't have anything against Bill Watts, but Stan was not a fan of that territory just because of the fucking crazy people, especially if you were a heel, and the just long, brutal trips in the schedule. You never got – any time off, especially if you were on top, but even if you were underneath. So he wasn't really a fan of the territory, just in general.
And then how would the double turn have gone if it had been in Philadelphia?
I don't think it would have gone as well because they liked both teams, but at that point, Philly was starting to be more of a smart crowd than everywhere else. And I think they would have been let down that it wasn't that long of a match and it wasn't competitive. It was they Pearl Harbored us, the baby faces jumped the heels, right? They Pearl Harbored us, put Bobby and busted him open, posted him, and then just 2-on-1 stand. And it was more an angle. So I think the Southern fans were more accepting of an angle situation like that. But that's, Dusty wanted to do that specifically because he knew that he was about to really put heat on the Road Warriors by having them spike him in the eye, which ended up putting more heat on him with TBS than anything else. And he wanted them to be heels. And also he knew that we had already made the deal to bring in Paulie and Dennis and Randy. And we were going to be the baby faces in that. So he said, we'll accomplish 2 things at the same time. We'll get sympathy on the Midnight Express, get the belts off of them the way that was done. It didn't make us look weak. It made us look taken advantage of. Because a lot of people, they fucking just beat him in like 6-7 minutes and it wasn't even a contest. Really Bobby's offense and a little flurry by Stan in the beginning was most of the extent of the offense we got, but it was the way that it was laid out. We were taken advantage of. We were fucked. Therefore they were the heels. We were the baby faces. And it put us in a position with the fans where we were still strong. We were still the Midnight Express, but now we're sympathetic. And then here's going to come in the original Midnight and going to steal our thunder. And this new fucking motor mouthed asshole that, is obviously trying to be, and that's truthfully the way they sold it or way we sold it, because that's what it was. He was trying in a lot of cases, Paulie at first, to be me, but then do his own thing with it. And, and I'm not even saying he was trying to do interviews like me, but he was following the Jim Cornette, because I was following the Bobby Heenan playbook. But he was I'm just afraid people are going to say, oh, now Cornette's claiming that Heyman fucking copied him. But no, well, okay, he comes into the territory managing a team called the Original Midnight Express with one of the members of the Midnight Express that I managed, and is another 25-year-old fucking manager. So, and he's doing a lot of the same flavor of shit. But that's what worked, because it was like the Rock and Roll and the Midnight Express were both great tag teams, but the Midnight Express were heel assholes and the Rock and Roll Express were teeny bopper idols. But otherwise, they were that yin and yang at mirror image. That's why it worked so well. The Bizarro World versions of each other. That was why Paulie and I worked, because even the people could tell these guys are fucking... They're the Bizarro World images of each other. There's so many similarities, but there couldn't possibly be more differences. And he was the heel, because say what you want about Cornette, he may be a prick, but he's our prick. I had the home team advantage. I'd been there.
That promo, the first promo you did after the attack, when you came out with the bloody white suit, and the crowd was making noise, and you kind of held your hand up to silence them, and they went quiet. Were you confident that they would actually listen to you and do what you wanted there?
I didn't know they'd do it so quick, and it was almost like it was on cue, like they flashed up the "Be Quiet" sign.
It was perfect.
But see, there was no PA system in this. Is what I was telling old Liver Lip Lagana when they set up their tapings. They have to have, because that studio's a little bigger. There's more people in it, but there was no PA system in the studio on those TBS shows, because it was literally a small enough room, and the acoustics in a TV studio are obviously fairly good, where you could hear if you were listening. And a lot of times it was great background for the fans to be screaming and yelling while I'm cutting a promo. But in this case, I needed them to hear exactly what I was saying so that they would pop on the rest and the go home later on. So I held the hand up because I expected maybe it would calm down a little bit. And next I would have said, hold on, you need to hear this, if I hadn't got what I wanted, but it was perfect. So I left it alone. But yeah, it was pretty fucking good. And also in that promo, yes, there was some elements of classic Jim Cornette there, but that's where I started bringing it back a little bit to, instead of just yelling, or instead of just being mad, I started bringing it back a little bit and doing the quieter vow of revenge. It's because that's more babyface. That's not, if I was still wanting to be a heel, I'd have gone out there and just yelled and made fun of everything, blah, blah, blah. But because I was a babyface, or being put in that position now, I still needed to be me, but I can always vary up the inflection or the pace or the volume or the delivery to where they don't notice that I'm playing a different part, but they notice maybe the point's made in a little bit different way. And they're like, oh, because now I want them to agree with me. So there's different ways you deliver things when you want people to either be mad at what you're saying or you want them to agree with what you're saying.
The fact that there was no PA system, how did that affect? I mean, Dusty stopped doing promos in front of the live crowd, right?
Well, he did, because see, that's one thing is the studio crowd was still mixed. You had the girls that were going to come because it was Saturday and the guys were going to be in Atlanta for a while and they wanted to get a head start. And you would see them on the front row, and you would have the guys that dressed up as the horsemen in the suits. They would make efforts and camp out, right? Or do what they needed to do to be in there. But still remember, it was free admission, and it was first come, first served. And you had to stand in line. So you always got people from that neighborhood, especially as all the little black kids that could just ride their bicycle from 2 or 3 blocks away on a Saturday morning. So you had the really hardcore smart fans, such as they existed at that time, the girls that were just like I said, just there to get on the front row and potentially wear panties or not, all the kids from the neighborhood, and then just some regular people. So it was a great cross section, and they all made different kinds of noise. But when Dusty, when he started getting heat with the Horseman group, a lot of times they could hijack the fucking, studio promo. And I mean, whether or not Dusty was doing in their minds, a good enough job as Booker or not, that wasn't good back then. It rarely happened. Now it happens all the time and everybody just, expects it. But back then it was like, no, I'm just not going to give these guys a fucking chance to bullshit during my promo because that's not the image that we want to send out on television. So he'd do something on tape or they'd show a VTR or whatever.
Was he the only guy that did that?
Well, he's the only guy that could do that. He could decide what he wanted to do, when, where, and how.
No, but there was no one else put in a position where you couldn't put him in front of the live audience because they would try to hijack.
I mean, you could. It just it took away from it. If he had to go out and do a promo, he would. And if it was something after an angle or whatever, where people are already into that, then they're not just going to switch gears. But he just, in some cases, he would stop just coming out and doing the standard promo like everybody else did. But it still made him more special, but it cut down on the amount of really good promos because, a handful of fucking, they meant well, they wanted to be fucking cool and for the Horsemen, but it just was eh.
The final question from this PWI weekly quiz from 1993. Who did the Midnight Express beat for its first U.S. tag team title?
Oh, shit. That was the tournament with Garvin and Wyndham, was it not?
That is correct. 1987.
Yes.
The most underrated program the Midnight Express had because no one talks about it. Garvin and Wyndham were a interesting team to put together, but they were because they were totally different styles. Wyndham was possibly the best wrestler in the entire world. You could argue he was in the top 5. And Garvin was just
now you couldn't argue in ring he was in top 5. You could argue whether he's number 1, but he was one of the 5 best at that time from 84 to 88 or whatever. And Ronnie was so good, and plus especially Bobby knew how to work with him so well. And as a matter of fact, I think we got a few matches with Dennis in before he left, and Dennis and Garvin was just fantastic because they had styles that meshed really good.
Well, that's where it started too. The when you burned Ron Garvin, I think Condrey was still in the team. Yeah, that's
right. Yeah, because that was Valentine's Day, the Valentine's Day Massacre of '87 in Charlotte. but yeah, those matches were so good, and it was a night off every night at the house shows because it was just so easy. And plus, watching Bobby and Barry Windham. I've talked about stuff where people now would say, okay, it was comedy wrestling and Cornette's bullshit. They were doing the same thing. No, they would actually have part of the match. They would do spots with each other on their knees because they were so good that they could do that. But the difference is the people didn't know that something bizarre was going on and that they were having fun because they made it look natural. The point where if fucking Bobby grabbed a fucking headlock on Barry and Barry shot him off and followed him close to the ropes and boom, gave him a tackle, and Bobby Eaton would fall backwards and sit backwards where he would hit the second rope. His ass would sit on the bottom rope and he would hit the second rope and he would bounce back. And fucking Barry would then hip toss him. Boom. And Bobby would roll over and come up to his knees. And fucking Wyndham would goddamn drop kick him while he was on his knees, right? Boom, now Barry's down. Now as Bobby rolls over, Barry's getting up to his knees. Bobby comes at him. BW snatches him up and gives him a scoop slam, but Barry's still on his knees. When he's and boom, and they would make it natural as they were wrestling around, where sometimes Bobby would hit the top rope when he hit the rope. Sometimes he'd hit the second rope and still bounce back. It was goddamn amazing. And nobody knew anything was wrong. It still was exciting, but they were so good. They needed to make things a little bit more difficult just to keep themselves entertained.
I've said it before. I think to me, maybe the most entertaining time of the Midnight Express in Crockett Promotions was after Starrcade up until maybe the late spring of 87 when Stan gets there. Like Crockett Cup. I love Crockett Cup 87. That match with you guys and the Road Warriors. Because it's just chaos. There's so much crap going on. You tease the fire, which you've set up with the Garvin match, and Bubba's in the mix, and it's just so much happening. Bobby's bumping all over the place. I love that period of the Midnight Express.
That was fun, and that was the That was the 2-night stand at the Baltimore, the Civic Center then, but the arena now, or what is it now? It's named after a convenience store or something in Baltimore. But anyway, that was a great place to work. And we stayed at the Days Inn right across the street. And Sabatino's was less than 2 miles away, like a mile away, whatever. It was just, we loved going to Baltimore.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Dan in Olympia, Washington. In every shoot interview I've seen with Ronnie Garvin, he speaks so bitterly about Jim Crockett Promotions and particularly Dusty Rhodes as the booker. Do you have any insight as to why Garvin, and for that matter so many others, had such a problem with Dusty as the booker?
Oh, God. Well, Ronnie is naturally grumpy anyway. And he was a great worker. Not a great promo, but actually he was a great Ronnie Garvin promo. He had the French Canadian accent, which made him obviously, pronounce some things or put the inflection on different places. You know what I'm talking about. Where sometimes he had that way of mispronouncing some words for the English ear. But you always thought that he meant what he was saying. He never came off as phony. And that's why, Vince was never interested, because Garvin didn't need a gimmick, because Ronnie Garvin really was a gimmick. He was a badass, tough fucker, right? Those chops were real, and he could stretch you. We talked about when he was playfully, it was a friendly shoot in the locker room, taking Hawk down and stretching him as far as wrestling wise. And he was very serious about the business but at the same time, he felt that Dusty misused him. He should have had a better shot. He should have had a better chance with the title run, whatever. Dusty's had heat with him for 30 fucking years. And as I think more than most, Dusty may have had heat with a number of different guys, but a lot of times, when you've been a booker that long, any booker that booked at that level, that long, that many places, a lot of guys are going to still be mad at him. That's just the way it is.
Our next question, Jim, sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Jared in Ohio. And this question was sent in by a lot of different people. So this is going to answer it for everyone.
Okay.
Recently, the son of Chris Benoit, David, did an interview, and he spoke fairly openly about his aspirations to be a pro wrestler. He also spoke a bit about the tragedy regarding the day his father killed himself, his wife, and his son. David also mentioned that he was interested in working under the name Chris Benoit Jr.
Ooh.
What advice would you give him in regards to his pro wrestling career? And would you advise him to discuss the murder/suicide? Or do you think discussing it and using his father's name will cast too large a shadow over what would be his career as a wrestler? And then he gives his own personal thoughts on this, but let me go to you for your thoughts, Jim.
Well, I haven't even seen David as an adult, so I don't know, physically what he looks like, size, etc., athletic capabilities, anything. But just on the concept of, so I can't advise him, no, you shouldn't be in wrestling because you're not big enough, or I don't think you'd be, or whatever. This is just the concept of Chris Benoit's son being a pro wrestler as an adult. I can't say he shouldn't be. If the genetics, or the whatever, were transferred, he might be a very good one. And you should never say that somebody shouldn't be able to do something because of something that their parents did or somebody in their family or whatever. I definitely think you can't use the name, because that puts, it's hard enough in the wrestling business also to get in and get over. And I know he may be proud because everybody close to the situation, yes, nobody's happy or can excuse or whatever what Chris did, but everybody who really knew the real him and for the majority of his life, I would think he was somebody that you would want to honor. Yes, I understand that, especially being his son, but because of the publicity, because of what happened, that's an automatic. I don't think anybody would book it. Well, yes. What am I saying? Some people would book it. They book the the poor kid that's challenged and does the stunts or whatever. Some people will book anything, but no big, responsible, legitimate company. They may book the son of Chris Benoit, and they may even reveal that he is and refer to that. But I don't think they'd book a Chris Benoit Jr. I don't think he should use that name. If he wants to use David Benoit, that's going to be hard enough anyway. I might, if I was him, I might try out, well, you can't keep a secret. I was going to say maybe put a hood on and get some experience and test the waters and see if this is for you, but nobody can keep a secret anymore. Guys used to play pro football, would wrestle in their fucking hometowns under a mask and nobody would know to make extra money. Now, you can't hide anything. Yeah, I can't say he shouldn't unless he's just not good enough that it would be, kind of just a fruitless task. I think he should try it if he wants to. I think he obviously should stay away from all the various things that he should know now are mistakes in a wrestling career. But I don't think he can use the name. Do you?
I don't think he could use the name Benoit. I mean, let alone Chris Benoit Jr. You can't.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do that. O.J. Simpson Jr., Charles Manson Jr. I mean, just you can't.
Well, all right. Yeah. I mean, fuck Adolf Hitler Jr. We're reaching a little bit here.
Well, no, we're not reaching. The guy did some heinous shit that can never be forgiven, never be forgotten.
Well, yeah, but I'm thinking that you probably would find even a few more people that would book Chris Benoit Jr. that would book Adolf Hitler Jr. So where there is still some level of fucking.
Well, look, they'll book the Invisible Man. I mean, there are guys today that'll book anyone. I wouldn't use that as the litmus test, but I think it's I don't know. I mean, you hate to tell someone, hey, you really want to do something. You're other than like Marco Stunt. You hate to tell someone, hey, you really want to do something. You shouldn't do it. I've never seen him. I don't know how big he is. I don't know if he's a big guy.
Well, that's the thing. If it was just going to be a deal where I want to be a wrestler and because my father was and I want to follow in his footsteps, if that's the only reason that he's getting trained or booked and everybody can see at the start that there would not be a reasonable expectation of him being a good, serious pro, that's one thing. But, if he could really fucking do it and do it well,
he shouldn't be penalized. I mean, that's the thing.
He shouldn't be penalized. Yeah.
I mean, it's a tough thing, though, because, he looks a lot. I've seen pictures of him facially. He looks a lot like his dad. And his dad, I mean, I can't watch a Chris Benoit match to this day. I get upset. I get pissed off. And, it's really tough. It's real. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't think he should be dissuaded if he has the size and maybe he has some natural ability and it's something he really wants to do. How old is he? Do you have any idea?
I can't. What would he? Fuck. I mean, he'd probably be college age now. Would he not? Because
Brian Pillman Jr. It's other than the tragedies and the murder and the suicide, it's a very similar story that he followed in his father's footsteps and has been making a go at it. And he has become a serious professional wrestler. I don't know. Where's he going to go? Is the WWF ever going to hire a David Benoit or a Chris? I mean, they're definitely not going to hire Chris Benoit Jr. Are they going to hire a David Benoit and give him a shot and make people look back on his dad? I mean,
they're, in all honesty, if this kid was developed somehow into a really good wrestler and had no bad habits, had no, there's no attitude issues or whatever, you could accompany with those resources and that could do packages and can tell and has all the library, could tell a heck of a story about his goal in life being to redeem his name, to instead of having people think bad thoughts every time they hear the name Benoit, to try to change that into good ones because of his example and not necessarily what how they remember what his father did. There's something there. If he was a tremendous performer, then that may actually help him if they went about it in that way. But otherwise, I think you got to almost stay away from it. There's no other. Speaking of staying away from things, we got any more questions?
We do, in fact, have many, many more questions.
Well, good. Well, let's get one.
This next one was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Daniel Rodriguez. Hello, my name is Daniel from Central Coast, California. I want to get your opinion on Tazz. Not the Tasmanian Devil cartoon, the extremely crappy wrestling Tazz.
No.
It's official that he's all elite. Are you a fan of him yourself? And if so, have you ever had any story? Well, again, I hate criticizing the way people write these, but do you have any stories about
that don't
Tazz?
stop you. Just because you hate it, it doesn't stop you at all every week.
Are you a fan of him yourself? And if so, have you ever had any stories about Tazz? And in your opinion, do you think Tazz is a good commentator? And if so, will he be a good fit for AEW's commentary team?
Well, what is this gentleman's name that asked this question?
Daniel from Central Coast, California.
Daniel, start listening to The Experience. Was it last week I said that before they announced they had signed him, he did the show the week previous. I said Tazz and JR needs to be their announce team. Let Tony do the interviews and let, the masked muddler go muddle somewhere else. Tazz is excellent, and now he's been doing this radio show. He's got a lot of broadcasting background at a high level, and part of being a good wrestling announcer at that level is being able to work with and understand the equipment, work with the crew. Having done that at a high level, be able to call live shows, shit on the fly. Tazz is very glib. He's got a great personality. I thought, if anything, he was trying a little bit too hard early in the show because you could tell he was into it and he wanted to, to contribute and do it. But by the end of the show, he had settled in, and it was the best. He and JR together were the best that I've heard on their program. I'm glad they signed him because he is not only a name that people know, but also he can do a good fucking job. And he's not a bullshit guy that, he's not going to be a color guy that's just full of bullshit. He can hang with doing some insight. Everybody that's seen the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Night of Legends DVD that we sold out of, and the package of things leading up to that, Tazz was in the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Rage in the Cage that May of '93, where we injured Bob Armstrong. He was on our heel team because Kevin Sullivan had seen him, and Kevin brought in a number of guys for, different things at that point in time, and he had recommended him to me, and he was going to be down that weekend, so we put him on our TV and our whole loop of shows there. And I think for a couple weekends maybe. That's when he really was the Tasmanian. He was the Tasmaniac, and he had the whole fucking face paint and a gimmick like the Tasmanian Devil. And so I was not a fan of that gimmick. We used it. But the guy was cool. And then later on, Paul did a great job in ECW of getting him over as a shooter, even though, let's face it, I think Tazz will admit he's not going to stretch Kurt Angle anytime soon, but people were believing it because he could look and work the part. And Paulie neutralized the height problem because Tazz is so, the way he presented him also, Tazz is so wide and so broad, and he could do the power shit. So, I've always, thought that his work was good. And I think, actually, I'm probably a bigger fan of his as an announcer than I was as a wrestler. But wait a minute. Should I say that and stop there? I've said good shit about somebody on AEW. Nobody will listen to that.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think, let's say they went with your idea and it's him and Jim Ross. Do you think you need a guy there in the Excalibur role to call the actual moves? Because neither one of those guys is really going to do it. It's going to be more about storytelling, about the match and the overall show. Do you need someone to do actual move-by-move, play-by-play?
There's the problem. They've got too many people, or they've got too many named moves, for one thing. It's fucking ridiculous. Yes, you need to... If everybody would just name their goddamn finish, the announcers would know it. but they got to name the finish and the fucking this move and that move and the other move and the lucha inspired move. And this move's in a different fucking language or whatever the fuck. These guys sound, if they could find somebody that was knew every single move of every name of every move rather, and was still an actual proficient professional sounding announcer for national television, bless them. But that's not the important part. If a guy's got a move that's a finish and he names it, I want to know that. Otherwise, if you call a goddamn running, burning hammer, falcon arrow, and you spend that much time, or you just react to it as, oh my God, right on his head, it doesn't really make a goddamn difference.
Do you think it made a difference with Vince when it was always, what a maneuver? And people would lose their mind in the sheets that he wasn't actually calling moves that he didn't know?
Well, but here's the thing. Vince had that way of sounding. He did the old-fashioned, what people still sometimes copy when they're trying to copy wrestling announcers. It's kind of that used car salesman type of thing. But no, JR was calling plenty of moves when it was there were a reasonable amount that you could keep track of, right? With it, you can't even if even Excalibur doesn't call all the moves in one of those fucked up goddamn video game Bucks matches or Olivier matches, because the human mouth can't speak that fast and they're not going to slow down for anybody. So in a lot of cases, yeah, plus people are watching it on TV. So a lot of times, if I'm doing play-by-play and it's just a regular old match and there's not that much backstory behind it, yes, I will slip into shoots him at the ropes, drops down to evade, hip toss there, wait a minute, kickoff, arm drag, look at Armstrong go. But other times, you just need to kind of go with it, and maybe that's the point where you're talking about how much longer can this go on? Both men are seemingly fatigued, whatever. It's not that fucking important that you dissect and correctly name every individual move of the goddamn match. How many wrestling move names did Lance Russell use?
That's a good question. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Well, pile driver.
Well, yeah, that's pile driver for sure.
But yeah, I mean, headlock, hip toss, backdrops, whatever. But when you start just getting ridiculous, it's just, everybody now feels the need that they've got to explain that that's the tope con hero. Fuck, he just dove out and blistered him. Brian, oh my God. Is dipshit ever going to get back up?
Okay, I didn't know you were ending on that note.
They just saw what happened. And if there's excitement in your voice and you're calling it and you're getting the guys over and you're talking about what's coming up, or you're selling the upcoming match, or you're filling them in on why these guys are mad at each other, or you just look at the scene in Madison Square Garden, my God, you don't need to sit there. Well, he's just gone into a headlock and now a hammerlock. Gordon Soley was great with it because he sounded like a technician. But Gordon Soley was also calling matches where people were actually trying to make it look like a competition, and it wasn't an endless repetitive cycle of bumps and moves over and over where you couldn't tell who was giving the move and who was receiving it. Or Gordon Soley wouldn't have called a lot of fucking moves by their name anyway. He would have been too busy asking for another fucking vodka. How long is this going to take before this is over with?
I thought he was more of a whiskey or gin guy than vodka.
He may have been a vodka guy, I think. I'm just thinking, I don't know.
Well, you would know better than I would think.
Well, but still, we'll go back and check his book.
No, but when there's a dive, I mean, I hadn't thought of it in this context, but reacting to it like, oh, look at what he just did, as opposed to, here's the name of the move that I have to give you right now. It does take away something from it. If I'm in the ring and you're on the floor, and we make eye contact, you and I suddenly start charging for those ropes, the announcer should say, my God, is Cornette going? Oh my God, he just dove right out. You can see it. And then you talk about the aftermath. Both men are down. My God, that took its toll on both men. Did you see the way that they connected or collided when he hit him? Of course, unless they just pushed off of each other and both landed on their feet. And then the announcer should say, well, he just jumped out of the ring and threw the ropes and landed on his feet. Apparently it must be easy. Okay, our next question, Jim, sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Mike DeGeorge. Have you seen much of Brian Cage? He's rumored to be the next AEW wrestler. I think he's fantastic and does things a 275-pound wrestler has no business doing. I describe him as Lex Luger if he lived up to his push.
Oh, good Lord. Well, in addition to being 275, how tall is he? I've heard I have not, honestly, in the interest of full disclosure, I don't think I've seen a Brian Cage match. I have heard that he's a big guy that's very athletic and does good shit. How tall is he?
I'm not sure. I could look that up while we're talking.
Well, I mean, unless I don't see Lex Luger-ish unless he's also 6'5" or whatever, which Package was in his prime. But no, maybe that might be a homework assignment, is look at some Brian Cage, because I've heard, as I said, that he's big and very athletic. I haven't seen anything, so I can't.
6 feet tall.
Okay, then I don't think he's Luger-ish, but a 6 foot, 275-pound guy that can do some athletic shit. Unless, of course, he's just like, what did I say? Who was it? Sammy Guevara last week leapfrogged a guy, and then when he landed from the leapfrog, he just jumped up and did another standing backflip just for the fuck of it. When this guy says he does stuff that a guy that size has no business doing, that can be taken in one of two ways. Either there's no way that a guy that looks like that and is that size should be able to do this amazing thing, or there's no way that a guy that's that size and looks like that should be doing this. It doesn't make any sense. So hopefully he's not one of those, but maybe we got to watch some Brian Cage.
I think the big comparison to Luger may be that he's bigger than he should be. I guess that's a nice way I could put that.
Oh, okay. But I've found a lot of times these days, I think that what I've noticed is the reason why I don't like some matches is not because of what they're doing, it's because of what they're not doing. Because everybody is so fixated on and concentrated on the execution of the moves, body language is almost lost. As far as the difference in what the veterans used to do and what the guys now do is the veterans approached it as, how can we do this spot and make it look good? Look good meaning make it not look fucking phony, right? Whereas the guys now are like, okay, we do this spot. How can we do this spot to be flawless and be perfect or whatever, but not thinking about how to react to it. For example, I'm a heel and you're a babyface, right? I've got you selling on the ropes. I shoot you off and go to clothesline you, but you duck it and keep running and come off the other side. I turn around and try to backdrop you, but you leapfrog me and keep going, hit the ropes. I turn around, you drop kick me. Then you drop kick me again, then you arm drag me and grab the fucking arm bar, right? That's a standard, simple wrestling spot. Duck the clothesline, leapfrog, drop kick, arm drag, fucking arm bar, right? Guys will do that, and there will be no variation in the pace. There will be no variation in the body language. There will be no variation in their facial expression because they are concentrating on making those moves look as good as possible. But here's what they miss. When I shoot you into the ropes and go to clothesline you, I draw back and swing that right, and you duck. My facial expression should be shit, and I should really fucking swing it and follow through with that right-handed motion. And when I realize I've missed, shit, and I do the look left and the look right. Like, where the fuck did he go for a second? Because I've got to kill that second because the guy's hitting the ropes. Then I turn to my left. I'll explain why in a second. You always turn to your left. I turn to my left, and also because that's the way my momentum was swung with the right-hand clothesline. And I see here he's coming off the ropes. I'm going to backdrop him. I bend over, but he leapfrogs me. When I stand up immediately, I've got to have the shock look on my face. I know I didn't backdrop him. He went over me. Maybe I throw my hands out in front of me to register, whoa, what the fuck? And because I've got to kill a second, because he's coming off the ropes behind me for that drop kick. I can't just turn right around or then I'm standing there waiting on it. But I don't want to fucking turn so quickly. So I do the thing where I shuffle with my feet, where I'm trying to get my balance, and my left and right feet come up and down a couple of times. And then I turn to my left, and there he's coming off the ropes. Brian, when anybody drop kicks, almost everybody in the business, they throw their right foot up first, right? And when they're hitting the drop kick, visualize this, they're laying on their left side in midair, and their right foot is up the top, either in the chest or face area, and the left foot is below it, right? I'm correct in this? You're visualizing this?
I'm visualizing it as you're saying it.
Okay, so as I turn around and the guy drop kicks me, if when he leapfrogged me and I did, oh, where'd he go? And I turned to the right, then I am turning in such a way that I will never see him until his feet are up in my face. If I turn to the left, then as his feet go up, I see him. But more importantly, I can see from when I start to turn, I see how he's coming off the ropes. I can make eye contact with him. As he comes up and throws those feet out, I'm already ready to put my right hand in front of my face, just in case. And I'm already leaning into, tucking my arm to take the fucking drop kick on the chest. And I'm leaning into it so I can throw my right foot up and take the bump. And it's smooth. You always want to keep eye contact with, or at least an eye on your opponent at all times. I've seen a lot of guys, when somebody will duck something or they'll leapfrog them or whatever, they will turn to the right. And that's not only going against the momentum that you've probably set up with the spot, but also just because the way most things are done, you're not keeping an eye on your opponent until he's right up in your face. When you turn to the left, you can see him coming off. It's just, you get the flow there, right?
Yeah.
So what was the question?
We were talking about Brian Cage.
Well, we lost him a long time ago.
I think you were talking about the disappointment you have sometimes.
Yes, it's body language. That's the thing, is that there's no shock when a guy misses a move. He's not like, where the fuck did he go? There's no body language to portray in big buildings. And part of this is because guys now, when they learn, some of these guys don't ever get in a big building for years. In the territory days, like we just had Bobby Fulton on the Experience Friday. You know, yeah, he started on small shows, but by the time he was 19 years old, he's jerking the curtain in the Memphis territory, which means he's making very little money and you know, he's the lowest guy on the totem pole. But every Monday night, he's having a 10-minute match on First, jerking the curtain in an 11,000 seat building. And every Tuesday night, he's jerking the curtain in the Louisville in front of, you know, a 6,000 seat building. Guys learn to work, and they learn their body language, and they learn the way to do these things in front of not only big crowds, but big buildings where you had to portray these things. Now it's just a constant go through the motion. In a lot of cases, it's because the moves are so complicated. And a lot of cases, it's because these guys started working and have mostly worked in very small buildings where you didn't have to really, you know, portray what was going on. Everybody can hear you. They can hear you calling spots in a fucking headlock. Does that make any sense? Guys have just lost the ability to make this look like it's happening in the moment with the proper facial expressions and body language of shock or anger or, you know, what a surprise, whatever the case may be. And when they're selling, you know, they're watching somebody punch them in the face and they're just, you know, taking a back step and waiting for the next big move. Instead of, boom, a guy just punched me in the face and I grab my mouth and my head snaps back and my knees buckle. And I'm on one toe on the right foot because I'm rubber-legged. They're just concentrating on all the moves. They're not portraying the build-up and after effect and the emotion involved. That's why it looks so rote by the numbers, repetitive.
Yeah, there's too many sequences that look like well-rehearsed sequences. There's too much running, just running past each other, running next to each other, looking at the other guy while he gets ready to run.
Oh, you know what I hate? And I've even told some guys about this when they did it. I'm like, what the fuck? When you will fucking do something to somebody, or maybe they've got a confrontation going on, right? And they do the fucking trade-off of forearms. And then suddenly one of them decides, well, I'm going to run and hit the ropes and come off with a tackle. You've seen this a million times, right? And they will be standing in front of this guy and they will turn their back on him and start running directly the opposite way from him. And number one, why would the fucking guy, when you turn your back on him and he's only a foot and a half away, why wouldn't he just kick you in the ass, grab you by the hair, fucking grab a rear naked choke, whatever? But then also, why would you expect the opponent to be there when you turn your back and do this little flourish where you start running and hit the ropes and come back toward him? It doesn't make any sense. I think we talked about that on a program here recently. Always hit the ropes to your right. You'll never go wrong. Remember it that way. Let's say you fucking pickled a guy and he takes a fucking bump. And as he's coming up, you want to give him a goddamn shoulder tackle. Don't turn your back on him and run straight behind you and then just go to the right, because that way you can always keep your eye on your opponent. And when you go to the right, you hit those ropes, you come off, he's seen you coming. So instead of taking your tackle, he drops down to evade you. So you jump over him, hit the ropes on the other side. He's coming up. Maybe he's going to hip toss you. If he hip tosses you, boom, he misses a goddamn elbow. It flows. It makes sense. It's just these little things that we're going to have Tom Pritchard on The Experience this coming week, who's one of the best trainers in the world today. And we'll probably talk more about just breaking these simple things down, but the matches flow better. Everybody's safer. You keep eye contact with people. You know what they're going to do ahead of time, even if it's just that fucking, I'm sending you this by telepathy through my eyes. You know to watch out. Something's coming. The little, and to make things look more spontaneous instead of just a pre-rehearsed, choreographed series of gaga. That's the art of working in wrestling, and that's what not enough people are paying enough attention to this.
Well, Jim,
sort of like my answer to that question.
Our next question, Jim, sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. I believe the name here is Jordan Francor. Good evening.
Good evening.
You sound like Heyman. I recently watched/listened to a YouTube clip of you and good old JR talking about your old suits from Men's Warehouse, and I heard you mention the name Mike Duncan. That is my grandfather.
Oh my God.
Who sadly passed away in 2011.
Oh my God. I did not know that.
I'm currently 18 years old and a huge fan of the old school style and presentation of real pro wrestling. And I can't help but feel like I've missed out on the stories that he may have had, which brings me to my question in this long-winded email.
By the way, Mike Duncan had some Tennessee territory stories from behind the scenes that would probably got a lot of people in trouble if they were ever printed. But go ahead.
Could you possibly share any stories about him being, of course, Mike Duncan?
Well, Mike Duncan was Christine Jarrett's nephew. And Mike, gosh, I'm trying to figure out how old he would have been. He was probably, if I was in 1982, if I'm 20, he was probably about 15 years older than me, maybe, I would say. But anyway, Mike had started out doing some announcing, ring announcing at live shows and also television. Mike, at various points in time, had been the host of the Nashville studio show, and he also did one down in, I think, did he do the Hunt? No, he did Huntsville with Sterling Brewer. I think he did the Birmingham show for a while. Maybe Birmingham was Sterling Brewer and he did Huntsville. Anyway, in the 70s, when Nick Goulas and Roy Welch were doing like 5 or 6 studio wrestling shows every weekend in that big ass territory, Mike did a lot of those. He handled local interviews over the years. It wasn't, he didn't do that steadily. When Nick went out of business, Mike had already got another job in Nashville, and he had also started coming up when Teenie lost her Louisville announcer that was always, had been for years, a DJ from the local radio station, Wacky, like Johnny Randolph and Bob Moody and Coyote Calhoun, those guys. She started, because Louisville was doing so well, she was able to pay the ring announcer. Now I guess 30 years ago, the ring announcer was in Louisville was making the equivalent of like $350 a night in today's money, just to come up and do ring announcing. That's how good Louisville was doing. When I filled in, I got $100 to fill in fucking ring announcer. Of course, Teenie liked me. That was probably more than the guy in the opening match was making. But anyway, so Mike would come up and he ring announced Louisville for about a 2-year period there. But also when I first got in the business, Mike's daytime job in Nashville was down at the Hickory Hollow Mall at this men's store. And I guess the statute of limitations, as they say, has run out. So I can say this because I was just getting started. I didn't have a suit or a tie to my name. Didn't know how to tie a tie. Mike's the one that taught me how to tie a tie. He got me fixed up with all my first wrestling manager suits because he'd have me come in. He would pick out stuff for me to wear. He would, give me advice, do all that stuff. And then when we went through checkout, and plus alterations were included with this also. When we went through checkout, he would ring up every third item. So I ended up getting like, and I mean, not like I'm buying really expensive shit here, and this is 1982, but I would say, for like $300, I got like $900 worth of shit. So he was, and I was like, are you sure? Oh, don't worry. I mean, he was since this young man is Mike's grandson, I will not tell one of the more classic Mike Duncan stories. It was outside the ring and outside the wrestling business, but it was classic. It was something that a lot of the boys did back in those days in the Tennessee territory. But anyway.
What kind of tease is that? Come on.
Well, I'm just, what would happen if you spent like 3 days of the week in Birmingham, Alabama, and 4 days of the week in Nashville, Tennessee, working in the wrestling business, and just say maybe you were married in Nashville and in Birmingham, but they might not be the same people. And then suddenly you come home one day and you find both of them on the couch talking to each other.
Ooh.
That's a fucking pop, right? But anyway.
How uncommon was that? Because I was just reading, I forget where I was reading it the other day about, maybe it was Texas. Some guy had 3 wives when he was working in Texas.
Well, you do and this is a good time to plug the Super Studcast. The Tennessee stud Ron Fuller, who tells stories from his family's 100-year involvement in wrestling. Roy Welch had a city wife and a country wife. He had the city wife in Nashville, who was a nice lady named Petey Welch. And she used to actually drive Teenie up to Louisville, and she was the first one that my mom started helping sell the pictures and the merchandise with. And then he also had one his country wife was over in Dyersburg at the Welch family estate. And apparently the Welch family were just, how can we say, incredibly talented with the ladies, because I've heard a number of stories where they got away with things that normal human, Homo sapien human people just couldn't get away with, and somehow lived to tell the tale. And there was I can't remember exactly which ones it is, and maybe you can get Ron to tell the story better, so I'm not going to name anybody, but the point is 2 members of the Welch family that were working the Mobile territory, one went to a town to work and was canceled, or the town was canceled, so he came back early and found another member of the family in, as they used to say, in flagrante delicto with his wife. And there was some heat about that, obviously. So then the boys, because it was such a juicy story, couldn't resist spreading it around, and it got to some of the, the regular fans and to some of the ringsiders, and people started hearing about it. So they actually booked the match, and it was going to be so-and-so versus so-and-so. And now a lot of the fans had heard about this situation with the wife, and the boys all knew about it. And the guys Involved started cutting the promos. I can't wait for us to come up. I'm going to beat that fucking guy's ass, blah, 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 right? And so I don't know if it drew any bigger business than the normal shows did at the gate, but when the match came about, the fucking curtain was sold out, right? They're going to see this big shoot over this fucking incident. And goddamn bell rang, and the first thing they did was lock up and take the head. And that's when the boys are, oh, fuck. We've been goddamn zoomed here. We've been swerved. We've been conned. And, but that just, things happen. I don't know how we got on that.
Mike Duncan.
Oh, Mike Duncan. No, but Mike Duncan, I really liked Mike. And we used to, every Tuesday night after the Gardens was over with, she wouldn't bring him to Evansville because, it was not a good enough town where, that was necessary. And Lance Russell did most of the Lexington shows as the actual live ring announcer, although Mike would be there when Lance couldn't. And I was doing Teeny's spot shows because there's no reason for Mike. He had, at the time, obviously he had a regular job and everything to come up, but he came to Louisville for quite some time. We'd always go out to eat at Hassenauer's restaurant down on Barrett after the Gardens matches. I loved their hot browns. Oh my God. But I like Mike. He was cool to talk to. Nice guy. And had a lot of, he'd done all those fucking live studio TVs for Nick for those years. He saw all kinds of fucking angles and shit go on.
What are hot browns? Are those potatoes?
No. You do not know what a hot brown is?
I do not.
A hot brown is the official dish of Louisville. It was first made. Well, no, seriously.
Is this official or are you declaring it because you like it? The official.
No, this is, they even have hot brown pizzas. Everybody in Louisville has is a hot brown. It was started back in I think the 20s or 30s at the Brown Hotel, at the bar and grill inside the Brown Hotel. It was a late night thing for the businessmen or whatever. The chef just fucking did it one day, and now they still sell them, as a matter of fact, to this day. Although it's the original hot brown, I don't think it's the best. Hassenauer's had what I've always considered to be the best hot brown, but they closed down years ago. Nevertheless, it's hard to describe, but it's basically, imagine an open-faced sandwich. You've got like giant, not just fucking sliced bread, but like nice big pieces of the Texas toast size type shit, right? And on top of that is white meat turkey breast. And you're looking at a nice big oval plate. So this is not just, it's fucking sizable dish. White meat turkey breast over the top of that. Then a bechamel sauce. It's like a cheese sauce with all kinds of goodness in it. With different, I don't know what the fucking spices and ingredients are and everything, and everybody does them different. And then bacon, strips of bacon over the top of it, and fucking slices of tomato. And you put that bad boy under the fucking broiler and get it all bubbly and brown on the outside, the little brown edges, the hot brown, and eat it with a knife and fork. Oh my God, you'll slap your mother.
Is there a place in Louisville if I just wanted a good pastrami sandwich?
Well, yes, we've got all kinds of delis and shit. I mean, it's not goddamn, Carnegie or anything, but it'll work.
I don't know if you've been in New York since. Carnegie Deli's gone, right?
Oh yes, I followed it on the internet, reading all the news and everything. Yes, it hurt my feelings. I'll never be able to go there again. But at the same time, I wasn't going to go all the way to New York just to go to the Carnegie Deli.
Have you been to Katz's Deli?
I have not. You threatened to take me one time and we didn't do it.
My favorite, and even though it's not the original location anymore, 2nd Avenue Deli was always, to me, the very best. If you wanted really good kosher deli food, it used to be on 2nd Avenue, and then in typical New York fashion, they lost the rent, and it became a Chase Bank, and now it's on, I think there's 2 locations. One of them's on, 33rd, between 3rd and Lexington, nowhere near 2nd Avenue.
Can you take me to the 2nd Avenue Deli? Well, what street's it on?
Yeah, exactly. But that, to me, was the very best. Katz's cafeteria seating.
Well, but this is completely different. This is the only reason I call it an open-faced sandwich is just to kind of give you an idea of what it might look like. But it's not a deli thing per se, but it's a giant fucking dish. It's good. But they have hot brown pizzas. They have hot brown casseroles. They have hot brown sliders. They have you'll find a hot brown something all over the place.
And you said official. Is it actually like was it declared the official food of Louisville?
Well, I don't know if it got a certificate, as my Aunt Lola would say, but yeah, if you ask somebody in Louisville, what is the local, I mean, because burgoo is a Kentucky thing, but the hot brown is.
What's burgoo?
Oh, for fuck. We've talked about burgoo. It's not a soup. It's not a stew. It's burgoo.
I don't remember talking about it.
No, Kentucky burgoo comes from, well, in the old days, with the first settlements like Boonesboro, they had those, you've seen the big iron like witches cauldron things. Well, that was in the old days at the end of the year, whenever you took what was left over. And of course, in those days, it was like possum and rabbit and squirrel and raccoon or whatever. But all the meats and if you had corn, if you had whatever vegetables you had left over and any kind of spices and pepper, whatever, you put it in a fucking pot in the middle of town and fucking cook it. And it's burgoo. And then they would be able to save some of that also through the winter. But this is back before electricity and refrigeration or whatever. But modern Kentucky burgoo, especially the best place, Mark's Feed Store, several locations around the Louisville area. If you go, just get the fucking burgoo and some Texas toast or cornbread. It's giant chunks of their barbecue, whether it's their brisket or their pork or there's chicken in there. And there's everything from carrots and peas and celery to all kinds of vegetables, corn. There's white pepper. There's black pepper. They won't give out the recipe. And Stace has been trying to wheedle it for like years. She'll go in and she'll say, well, I'm allergic to such and such. Oh, that's not it. So she'll cross that off the list. Or is there so-and-so in this? Well, yes, that's one of the ingredients. But she's been trying to piece it together. But it's a spicy, beefy goodness, and where it's thicker than soup. It's kind of a stew, but it's not really. You eat it with a spoon, and sop the bread up in it. Oh my God, it's just so good. Burgoo.
Are you into brisket?
Yes, I like me some brisket.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, anyway, but the point is, yes, there's no, if you go to Mark's Feed Store, there will not be any squirrel or raccoon or possum. Every once in a while, they slip a skunk in just to keep, people on their toes. But it's goodness. That's what you get when you come to Kentucky is goodness.
Have you ever had frog's legs or alligator?
I had frog's legs one time right after that second knee surgery, but after a couple months of rehab, no, I'm not going to eat a goddamn frog's leg. No, that's bullshit.
What do you mean it's bullshit? It's delicious.
It's bullshit. I'm not eating a leg off a fucking frog.
You don't have to rip it off the frog. You just have to
I don't care
eat it after it's been fried.
If it's ever been connected to a fucking frog, I don't want it.
What about alligator?
I've had alligator, but the fried alligator bites. And I mean, if you get them in Florida and it's a high-end place, yeah, but otherwise I don't feel the need.
Have you ever had shark?
Believe it or not, I'm trying to think. Somewhere, I think, in Florida also, just for the fuck of it. I don't recall being a fan, but it wasn't offensive. I won't eat things like fucking people say crawfish. Fuck that. They're mud bugs. They're mud bugs. They live in holes in the ground in muddy areas. I've seen them crawling out of the fucking lake back behind us here. When I was a kid, we'd go over there fishing years ago on the farm. They're fucking filthy, disgusting, bottom-feeding mud bugs, and I will not eat crawfish. I do like catfish, but not like gas station catfish or whatever. If you go to a really good Cajun place and you get really well-prepared catfish that's fresh, it's fucking fantastic, but you can go very far wrong on catfish too.
That's kind of what I was going to ask you. When you worked in Mid-South, when you were in Louisiana, was there a lot of good seafood?
Oh yeah, well, we didn't get to eat hardly any of it. But yes, there was and continues to be to this day. I mean, we never had. Every once in a while for a special occasion, and it wouldn't be like me in the midnight going. You'd take your girlfriend or wife or whatever. You would, if you got a day off, maybe once a month, you would go to a nice dinner. But I mean, I think I ate in an actual sit-down restaurant where you had to order and the food was brought to your table, and, you know, otherwise than like a goddamn cafeteria or something, maybe a dozen times in a year in Louisiana, in that territory. Well, maybe a little bit more, because usually sometimes we go to the buffet in Oklahoma City. It was always around our trips. You never had time off. You didn't want to go out in public if you were a heel. You know, so yes, there was, but I lived in Louisiana for a year, but I've eaten the majority of the great Louisiana seafood and Cajun cooking over the last 10 years since I've been down here a couple times.
If you were a foodie, what territory would you have wanted to work in?
Well, God, see, there's different cities. You know, food's great in New Orleans, especially if you love Cajun and seafood. Florida has great food all over the place. Baltimore is the place to go if you just want to eat. Little Italy, so many places are good there. Sabatino's is the old favorite, but there's a number of good places in Little Italy, but also the Inner Harbor, Fells Point, the Edgar Allan Poe themed fucking place that we went. I'm trying to think what the name of it was. It's reviewed on JimCornette.com under Now with Tomato. But there is probably more great restaurants and more variety of same in Baltimore than any place except like a fucking, you know, New York or Los Angeles. And Baltimore is so much more pleasant to be in than those places. So, yeah, but it doesn't have to be a territory. You're just talking cities, great city. Then in Memphis, you got the barbecue. And it goes on and on.
All right, well, let's get a few more wrestling questions here this week before.
What are we talking about here today? Fuck, I guess it's better than last. Now we're making you hungry. Last week we made you throw up.
All right, well, our next question.
Last week's show was the infamous show. Yeah. All right, let's hurry. We got songs to get to.
Our next question was sent in.
I got a mattress coming.
Our next question was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Rob O. And this has been a topic that a lot of people have sent in. Jim, what are your thoughts on the rumors that Edge could return at the Royal Rumble in the number 30 spot? And obviously, we've received a lot of questions about the potential that Edge will be returning to the ring several years now after he retired due to neck injuries.
Well, you know, I'm like Triple H. I wonder if Edge has any kids he doesn't know anything about.
Wow.
No, that's what I'm fucking with you. That's what got Triple H in trouble when he said, well, I want these guys to be able to enjoy their children and have a good quality of life. And that's when he fucking put his foot in his mouth about Paige. I think it would be great. I've always been a fan of Edge's as a person and as a talent. From his first tryout match, we've told that story. I thought he was tremendous. If he can come back in a limited fashion and do what he wants to do and what he feels comfortable doing, and I'm sure the people would love to see him. I wouldn't want him to take any serious risks because, you know, he and Beth apparently are very happy. That's a refreshing thing in the wrestling business. And they've got those, you know, nice looking little kids. And he lives in Asheville, which is a great place to live. Nice and easy, you know, so he's got, as an old friend of mine used to say, he's got a bird's nest on the ground with what he's got. But I'm sure he didn't like the way that he had to retire, and he wouldn't have been in the business if he didn't like doing it. So if he can come back and, you know, make some fucking big money and have some matches that he feels comfortable with, doesn't hurt himself, I think that'd be fucking great.
All right. Well,
I don't know what else to say.
How would you handle this sort of situation if you were the promoter or the booker, a guy who previously had an injury that doctors told him he had to stop wrestling because he could potentially lose his life if he takes a bad bump? The guy wants to get back into the ring. How cautious would you be if you were in charge?
Well, and you can always lose your life if you take a bad bump, depending on what kind of bump it is. I think it was more the prognosis was legitimately you could risk, the same thing with Austin. You could risk some form of paralysis or losing, you know, some function in your limbs or whatever the fuck. It isn't like, you know, if he takes a body slam, he's going to die. That would be just insane. But after this many years, he's always been a great trainer. Is he in good shape? Has he got another doctor's opinion that says, no, this is, because all the time, guys, look at Tommaso Ciampa. All the surgeries he's been through, and he comes back and he looks like that and he can perform like that. He's a fucking freak. Cena has always been quick to come back from injury. Some people, their bodies, whatever. The point is, if a qualified doctor says you should be able to do this with no lasting bad effects, if you don't do this or don't fucking put stress on whatever, obviously don't get dropped on your head. I mean, we just talked about last week, Pampiro Firpo he had a perforated intestine in 1968 and had surgery while he was in Hawaii, and he wrestled for another 10 or 12 years, but he told his opponents, don't hit me in the stomach, I could die. And he modified his style. Freddie Blassie, some of the biggest money he ever drew was after he had a kidney taken out. But he modified things. I'm not saying Edge should be stupid and go out there and try to do everything that he's ever been able to do, but if he can go out and do enough things to where that the people say that was a good match, and boy, we love seeing Edge, and he's getting main event WWE money, and he feels comfortable with it. There's obviously the one good thing about wrestling, you can't ever control everything. Things do happen. But you can obviously be the master of most of your own destiny in the ring with what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And he's not going to, I'm sure, ever do it. And this is all speculation anyway to begin with, but I'm sure he wouldn't be going back to a full schedule or whatever and just punish himself repeatedly. So that's the kind of guy, if you can get a few pay-per-view matches out of him over a few years and a few appearances or whatever, and he has fun, and people like see it, nobody gets hurt, that's a fucking win-win.
Okay, 2 last questions here this week, and let me just say, Professor Ouch, I know you wanted your question on this week. It'll be on next week because it will be a long answer, I believe, so I don't want to go too long this week.
Well, there you go. And also that way we wanted to advertise that for next week so the people will tune in for Professor Ouch's question.
Yes, he signs off, stay weird, which I appreciate.
Yeah. Actually, that's a Louisville thing also. The folks down in the Highlands, like they do the bumper stickers, keep Louisville weird. Professor Ouch and his Bizarre Bazaar has been a wonderful place in Philly up there for years.
This question was sent in the CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Derek. I was wondering if you had any memorable stories about dining with Jim Crockett Promotions talent at Sabatino's, like someone consuming a ridiculous amount of food in one setting, or just a night when the boys were notably rambunctious. Now that Sabatino's is gone.
What?
That's what it says here.
Are you serious?
Now that Sabatino's is gone, what other popular eating spots with the boys from the old days of the NWA are still around?
Oh my gosh. Fucking hell. Sabatino's, they'd been there for 50 years or more. I'll tell you, there were a lot of good memories, and it was the place we went, and etc. There are Italian restaurants that have food of equal quality on their menus, with the exception of I have never eaten garlic bread like this. Have you been there, haven't you?
I haven't, but as you're saying this, I'm looking it up. It appears that it's still open, so I don't know if it's a different location or, I mean, it looks like it's the original place here. All
right, well, give me a heart attack, for fuck's sake. But the garlic bread at Sabatino's, I don't know how they do it. It not only is it's not just garlic bread. There's garlic and there's all different kinds of seasonings, and it's almost like they almost dip it in some kind of butter and then bake it because it just melts in your mouth, and the seasoning is incredible. And guys would go in sometimes and just get 3 or 4 big baskets of garlic bread and fucking drink beer, but the garlic bread is insane. Flair used to love the Clams Casino. Flair would get those Clams Casino by the goddamn boatload. Yes, Sabatino's was the place. I don't know that when we started going there, the guys were already going there. I don't know when they found it. Flair was the one that said, is everybody going to Sabatino's night? We're like, what's that? He's like, just stay tuned. So obviously the baby faces and heels would not go together. But you could get away with some intermingling of some description because there were different floors. It's in an old house, like most of those restaurants in Baltimore are in Little Italy. It's in an old house, and so there were dining rooms on several different levels. You could be in one part of the restaurant and never know about somebody in the other part. And because they started realizing the boys were coming in, they would give you like one of the closed off rooms downstairs where it'd just be a table of, 8 of you on one side and 6 of you on the other side, and there wasn't anybody else there. Occasionally somebody'd wander in to go to the bathroom. And yeah, everybody consumed mass quantities of everything, but publicly, how people will remember Sabatino's is that was the restaurant when they announced the Crockett Cup was going to be in Baltimore in 87. That was the restaurant that we flew up and did the announcement of the seedings, the top 10 seeds for the tournament. And so one day while it was on a Wednesday or whatever, there was a house show going somewhere, but they took me for the midnight, Ellering for the Road Warriors, JJ for which combination of horsemen was going to be involved, Jim Crockett. I think Dusty was there for the main event. I think Flair probably, whatever. And we did the press conference / seedings announcement and everything. And of course, JJ, the spaghetti they called it a spaghetti a la Gus. It was a souped up spaghetti with garlic and oil where there was also more seasonings and more little peppers and spices and things. And he'd been eating that, and he had dribbled that goddamn olive oil all down his front of his suit. He was trying to get that out before we shot the thing. And we shoot it, and I get mad that the Midnight Express are not seated number 1 and cut a promo on everybody and storm off and stop and come back and get one more piece of garlic bread and then storm off. And afterwards, we're on the street in Little Italy at like 4:00 on a Wednesday afternoon, trying to get cabs to take us back to the airport to Crockett's plane after we've shot this thing. And Frances Crockett, bless her, used to wear, she dressed like Pat Benatar in the 80s because that was fashionable. But that was not fashionable for a woman of Frances's age, which at that point was, I guess, mid-40s. And she's got these zebra print spandex, skin-tight pants on with these stiletto heels and some kind of headband and this colorful animal print top with a zabada and dangly earrings. And she's leaned over on the side of the street outside Sabatino's. She's leaned over asking the cab driver if he can hold however many people or whatever. And JJ looked at me and I looked at her, and I looked at him. That a picture spoke 1,000 words. I don't want to accuse Frances Crockett of looking like a working girl on the streets of Baltimore, but it was just it was a goddamn hell of a picture. But anyway, we had it. And then every time when we started getting Crockett's plane and flying up, instead of staying over in Baltimore where we'd fly back, instead of getting fucked out of our Sabatino's, Flair would tell the pilot and co-pilot, part of their thing was when they were supervising the refueling and, re-racking of the airplane to go back home, they got the beer and they would send somebody out to Sabatino's and bring back giant things of spaghetti with garlic and oil and garlic bread and fucking chicken parm and all the shit so we could eat it on the plane going back. I loved Sabatino's.
What did Frances Crockett wear when she took you in the Express? Was it Harlem or was it just Upper Manhattan?
Oh God. It wasn't. It was an economically depressed area of New York. We were doing publicity for the Bunkhouse Stampede in January of '88 that was going to be at Nassau Coliseum, and we had to go to a couple of different radio stations. And she gets a limousine. And so it's me and Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane and Frances Crockett in a stretch limousine. And Frances is dressed pretty much like that. Of course, Bobby and Stan both have the blonde hair, and they're wearing Zubaz and fluorescent pink shirts and shit. And I'm holding a furry tennis racket and dressed in my goddamn gimmick suit. And they drive us to the radio station, and then somehow we're going back to the airport or wherever. But we're hungry, and can we just stop at McDonald's? So the guy stops at McDonald's, and we go in this McDonald's, and it looked like one of those movies. You'd see Charles Bronson sitting at the table when the fucking shit goes down, right? In the middle of New York, and there's a not the subway, but the elevated train that goes over, and we're just in the hood somewhere, right? And we go and look at all of us, right? We're not from here. They could tell that. And we order to go. We're going to get in the limo and go back. And the fucking limousine driver locks his keys in a limo. So now we are all on foot, and we're starting to attract attention. More of the neighborhood bystanders, many of them not speaking any English, so we can't tell whether they're for us or against us. And this guy is trying with a guy while we're outside this McDonald's, dressed like we're dressed, looking like we look. There's no cell phones. Francis is on a payphone, which once again, that made an interesting picture up against this wall of this McDonald's while we're standing there with bags of food, and this guy's got a coat hanger. He's trying to break into this fucking limousine, which is probably not the first time in this neighborhood a limousine has been attempted to be broken into, but by the goddamn driver. And it took finally, they had called somebody, but it was either a cop that came by or some automobile technician with one of those Slim Jim things that got us in. We sat there for like 30 minutes. I thought we were all going to be kidnapped and taken away, held for hostage or something. I always had interesting times coming to the Northeast with Francis Crockett.
Just to go back to the original question, other than Sabatino's, what other places that the boys would frequent during the days of Jim Crockett Promotions are still around?
Oh, gosh. I just, when I was in Atlanta in October, I just saw Simon Malone's Bar and Grill that Ric Flair has probably spent more money in over the last 40 years. That was a place that the guys used to go to when we do Atlanta TV, and they'd go there and hang out and wait on a flight because it's right next to the Atlanta airport. And it was easy in those days to get around. There was Plum Crazy, the nightclub in Charlotte. Flair always threatened to buy that. I think he probably inadvertently did over the years. He spent enough money to, but it was a big giant purple building, kind of shaped like a plum, and they called it Plum Crazy. There was usually a place in every town where, the guys near the hotel or near the airport or where they had to kill time or get something to eat. And then they would, until somebody did something to get them kicked out, and then they'd find a new place.
Okay. Well, our final question here this week on the Drive-Thru, Jim, was sent into CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi.
Oh, for heaven's sake. All right. I knew it had to happen.
In a recent interview, Cody Rhodes said that AEW is a mix of old and new school wrestling. Cody said, quote, "I like Memphis wrestling, Southern wrestling. I revel in that old school. If you mash that up with the new school and create something new, like Darby Allin does or MJF, people will let you know how much they love it." What are your thoughts on Cody's take on AEW?
Well, with Darby Allin and MJF, they have in effect taken new guys, but it wasn't, especially with MJF, it's not really a mashup. He would have been a talent in any generation, so it's not mashing the old with the new. MJF is a pro wrestling guy. Darby Allin, to me, the mashing of the old with the new is just his size. A guy of his size may not have gotten an opportunity, in the old days. But if, as we've talked about here on the show and when we've done the AEW reviews, he's got something. He's graceful. He's athletic. He's got a charisma. He's got a newfangled gimmick, which is a mashup also. But still, he would have probably, cut the mustard, as they say, in the territory days. Where the mashup to me that doesn't work is when you get your My Little Dog Pockets or your Riho or your all the other stuff that we talk about. That is just that's like mashing up strawberries with mashed potatoes. If you put strawberries in your mashed potatoes, people are probably not going to fucking like it because it kills the potatoes and the strawberries. And so that's, to me, is why I think the show is schizophrenic. If you're going to do that fucking Invisible Man, video game cosplay wrestling bullshit, then do it. But if you're going to try to do real wrestling, real pro wrestling, traditional pro wrestling on the same program, I don't think it works, because the strawberries that you put in the old-time wrestling fans' mashed potatoes make them not like the old-fashioned wrestling or not want to stick around to see it, and vice versa. The people who just want to see video game bullshit, they're not going to necessarily like in most cases, they actually can like the old-fashioned wrestling classics, because they get involved in that. It's just this new horse shit that the classic wrestling fans don't like. That we've said it before. Young people can watch the old stuff on YouTube and get into it, but the old-time fans hate the new shit and can't get into it because it just doesn't fucking work for what wrestling is. So I don't think his analogy is correct, because they're not mashing old with they're mashing old with new, but the only shit that actually fucking makes sense is the young guys doing the old shit.
And it drives me crazy. And they started it when people compare it with Mid-South Wrestling, because there was nothing about Mid-South Wrestling on the show other than the fact that Jim Ross exists on this program.
Yes.
You watch Mid-South Wrestling, and there's a plausibility that's applied to everything. Everything's explained. Everything makes sense. Even if something isn't on that show, they address it. They talk about it. It's not something happens at a segment and then it is forgotten for weeks. It is not things that are completely, even if something isn't plausible, try to explain it so that it is. They don't have that. Yeah. There's nothing Mid-South Wrestling, and I know Mid-South Wrestling as well as anyone. There's nothing that's like Mid-South Wrestling on this show. But on that topic, we didn't even talk about it.
Well, All Elite Wrestling is a combination of two things. It's a combination of late 90s era WCW television, and I'm not saying that as a knock. That's the way that it looks and is formatted and is presented, and the other combination is with modern indie level bullshit.
It's WCW Nitro meets Pro Wrestling Guerrilla.
Well, there you go.
What did you think? We didn't even talk about this on the show, and it's one of those things that I really hate. Their fans seem to like, but that opening car crash tag team match, the 4 teams just going out and doing everything they can, to the point where I was exhausted. That spot with the suplex where all 8 guys are suplexing.
Oh, God.
And we can, it doesn't even matter that it's Orange Cassidy who gets in there and he's the deciding vote, or, for lack of a better term, in the suplex. It's the actual spot itself. What do you think of that? I hate that kind of shit.
Well, no, it's stupid and ridiculous, and it tells, once again, everybody that's in the arena and everybody watching on television, okay, we just want to remind you, as if you needed it, we're all working together. Nobody means any of this. And we just, we're tickling ourselves. And it's just a way for them to shoehorn the fucking idiot, My Little Dog Pockets, into the thing. They still don't want to pull the trigger and actually have him have a match, because it will get such backlash from people who are so offended by the fact that he's on the program. But they think if they do these little things, then people maybe not get sick of him or whatever. I don't know, but it's just fucking stupid. And to do that on national television, I will admit, people say, Cornette never admits when he's wrong or he's done something bad. I'll say this and then we'll play our songs. I did a stupid spot like that one time for my own amusement, and I'm not proud to admit it now with the, stand I've taken. But yeah, at St. Teresa's Gym in downtown Louisville, at one of our church gym practice shows, we had a 10-person tag match with the Disciples of Sin and Sin against Kenny Bolin and the Bolin Services Group. And we did the old fucking spot. I told him to do it because I wanted to see it. It's my girlfriend and my best friend and a bunch of guys in wrestling school in front of 60 people in a church, and it was not being taped. I said, all right. And as before cell phones. So just see if you can do this. The headlock chain, where the babyface grabs a headlock or the heel grabs a headlock on the babyface, right? And then here comes a babyface, grabs a headlock on a heel, and here comes a heel, and they do that. And finally, right in front, the last person to grab a headlock. Bolin is somewhere near the front, but the last person to grab the headlock is Sin. Now there's 10 people in a headlock chain. I said, all right, throw Sin into the ropes when she comes and hits the next person. Then all of you take the bump. Is one tackle, right? 9 people take a bump. Now this will be funny and we'll get a laugh and it won't hurt anybody. It'll lighten up the tension, whatever. Bolin's big fucking feet and the fact that even then he was past 400 pounds and almost immobile, he stepped on somebody as they started to do the little shoot off, and it just looked like fucking dominoes. Sin ran and hit the ropes, but because Bolin and his weight and everybody was holding on to each other, and it's impossible to fucking make him go any direction he doesn't want to go, when she comes back off the ropes, he had tripped the entire other 9 fucking people. By being in the middle of that, when he stepped on somebody's foot and tripped them and he fell, he took everybody with him. She ran back and there was nobody standing up to fucking run into. I said, all right, that's karma. I'm gonna ditch the fucking comedy spots. And we just, so yeah, I think that goddamn suplex on national television from a supposed big budget, operation. It's just, they can't be serious. And that's what, once again, pisses me the fuck off. They've been renewed for 4 years because the standard of viewership and with the viewers you need to draw is lessened so greatly. But they've been renewed, and they've got a billionaire backing them, and they've got national cable television. They have all these assets going for them, and they can't get their head out of this fucking local, yokel, rec center, PWG, outlaw indie bullshit enough to make a product that people could not be embarrassed about or think is just all bullshit. And we're just all kidding. We're just all putting on a show. They just can't get their heads out of their ass and be serious. And that's the most offensive thing to me. They just can't do it no matter how hard they try. Well, they don't even try. Cody tries. MJF tried. The people who are trying to be serious are doing well at it and are getting over. And the other people are having the same fucking shit they do every week, and then they're giggling about it.
It all comes from the top.
And shit runs downhill.
But as we wrap things up,
quickly.
Want to remind you, send your submissions if you have any. Otherwise, we will be running out very soon.
We'll take all your submissions and all your emissions.
CornyDriveThru@gmail.com is the best way to send it in. Please send it as an MP3 track if you can. If you need to, you could send a SoundCloud link or a link to it as an unlisted video on YouTube. But CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. Of course, you can hear the Jim Cornette Experience when it debuts this Friday. We'll do the usual song and dance, and I believe you said Dr. Tom Pritchard will be on the show this week.
Dr. Tom Pritchard talking about all kinds of things, including how he is training the group of next generation superstars and old stories from the distant past.
You can hear that wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast, and of course, the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, tinyurl.com/official Corny YouTube, or just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette for full shows, clips from the shows, the omnibus collections, and so much more. Jim Cornette on YouTube, and don't forget the Cornette Archive on the Arcadian Vanguard video channel. You can follow Jim on Twitter @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter @GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com, or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcasts. Of course, Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com. It's a figure frenzy this week at JimCornette.com.
Just buy the action figures and no one will get hurt.
Buy the action figures, but also buy the burger towels, the DVDs.
Oh, towels ain't up yet. Towels next week.
Oh, I didn't realize you were out of towels.
No, we've been out since before Christmas. That's why I said towels coming back in January. They're custom made. We have to restock. They'll be in next week.
Okay.
I sold out of almost everything. I don't have time to tell you how, but just buy. If you want something that's listed on my site, buy it now because you don't know how much longer it's going to be available. The shelves were almost bare at Christmas.
That's what I was going to say. Do you feel bad when you actually do sell out of these things and you had those custom shelves put in and they're all of a sudden empty?
Well, then I fill them back up with more stuff.
Well, get your stuff.
Different stuff.
Get your stuff today. JimCornette.com. But until Friday on The Experience, for Jim Cornette, I'm the great Brian Last. Tally-ho!